The walls of the diplomatic hall in Washington, D.C. gleamed under artificial light, polished to perfection. The room buzzed with the hushed tension of an international cabinet meeting. Defense ministers and military strategists from across continents gathered around the oval table. Documents spread, laptops open, voices exchanging protocol and platitudes. General Ousmane Diallo stood near the center, his uniform sharp, his face the image of composure. He had rehearsed his presentation dozens of times, fine-tuned each slide. This was supposed to be his moment, a step forward in international relevance, recognition from Western allies, a sign that he'd outgrown the shadows of West Africa. His voice was steady as he spoke on transnational security cooperation. Then the door opened, not with a knock, not with protocol, just the cold, deliberate swing of wood on metal hinges. A figure stood at the threshold. No one had seen him enter the building. No escorts, no diplomatic schedule. Only his boots echoed as he crossed the floor. Ibrahim Traoré. The name alone drained the color from several faces. He walked with calm precision, eyes sweeping the room like a hawk hunting among mice. There was no smile, no expression of courtesy, only silence, profound and suffocating. If you're captivated by true power moves and political thrillers, don't forget to subscribe for more gripping stories from behind the headlines. These are the moments history whispers before it roars. Traoré didn't speak. He didn't need to. The air shifted. He stopped behind an empty chair, leaned slightly, and sat, folding his hands with regal calm. Rachel Morgan, U.S. Secretary of Defense, leaned toward an aide, her brow furrowed. "He wasn't scheduled," she whispered. "He wasn't even supposed to be on this continent." General Diallo froze mid-sentence. The color behind his dark skin drained just enough for those watching to see it. His voice stumbled, then returned, forced, mechanical. He tried to keep his composure. Eyes darted to the door, to Traoré, back to the audience. Traoré met his gaze like a stone meets the wind, unmoved. The meeting fumbled forward. Some officials tried to redirect attention to the slideshow still glowing on the screen. Others dared not speak at all. The tension crept like a rising tide, unrelenting and invisible. Diallo spoke of alliances, training exercises, security investments. His voice grew louder, desperate to reclaim the room. But the power was gone. It had shifted. Everyone felt it. Traoré said nothing for 15 minutes. He didn't move, just watched. Then he stood. No clearance, no microphone. Yet when he spoke, the room obeyed. "There are 3 things a man should never forget," he began, voice smooth and precise. His country, his oath, and who he swore it to. He didn't mention Diallo by name, he didn't have to. Every word, every syllable was a blade pointed at the general's chest. "I left my house," Traoré continued, "not because I trust foreign chairs, but because a man who wears my flag plotted beneath your roofs." Silence. No one breathed. Rachel Morgan narrowed her eyes. "President Traoré," she began carefully, "what exactly are you implying?" Traoré turned his head slowly, only enough to acknowledge her presence. "I am not implying. I am delivering." That was when the air cracked. From the hallway, another set of boots approached. Colonel Seydou Bamba stepped into the room, tall, stone-faced, bearing a single document folder in one hand. Traoré smiled. Once. Brief. Cold. General Diallo took one step back. Diallo tried to steady his breath. Every eye was now on him. The PowerPoint on the wall flickered, ignored and irrelevant. The walls seemed to close in. The polished room became a stage, and he, no longer the presenter, was now the man on trial. Colonel Bamba stopped 3 paces behind Traoré. His presence, like his silence, was absolute. The folder in his hand bore the seal of the Burkinabe Armed Forces. Traoré extended his hand slowly, took the folder, and placed it on the table in front of him. He opened it with care, as if unveiling something sacred. "There was a convoy," Traoré said, voice level. "A transport of confidential assets, diverted, intercepted, burned." A hush gripped the room. "There was a phone," he continued, eyes on the pages. "A satellite line, calls made to Côte d'Ivoire, then to Paris, finally one to Langley. General Diallo shifted. Traoré looked up, straight into his former ally's soul. You made those calls. Diallo's mouth opened slightly, then shut again. He took half a step forward, voice brittle. Mr. President, there must be some confusion. Those calls, those are standard communications in my capacity as— No, Traoré interrupted, soft and final. They were not. They were encrypted, unauthorized. They triggered alerts in 3 independent surveillance systems. Yours was the only clearance level capable of executing them. The words dropped like hammer strikes. Rachel Morgan rose from her seat. President Traoré, you're accusing a high-level military official of treason on American soil. That's not something we take lightly. I do not accuse, Traoré said, his tone still measured. I reveal. His fingers tapped the page. On the night of May 17th, Diallo's forces redirected loyalist patrols. An explosion occurred in Ouagadougou's 2nd district. 3 civilians died. I was targeted at 02:13 a.m. My guards died shielding me. I survived by a twist of fate. Diallo's hands trembled slightly. You can't be serious. That's not— This is a misunderstanding. I helped secure that city after you failed to destroy it, Traoré replied. The calm in his voice was no longer soothing. It was surgical. Colonel Bamba stepped forward. From his coat, he removed a small flash drive and slid it across the table toward Minister Morgan. That, Traoré said, contains full transcripts of the calls, satellite positioning, and movement logs, confirmed by independent analysts, including 2 American operatives you'll recognize by code. Morgan's face hardened. She gave the slightest nod to an aide, who collected the device and stepped away. Diallo's mask cracked. You don't understand, Ibrahim, he said suddenly, dropping the formalities. You don't see what's coming. You think isolation will protect Burkina Faso? You think you can resist the tide of global order? I did what I had to, for the country. Traoré tilted his head. For the country, he leaned forward. You made deals in the dark with people who never cared whether we stood or burned. You sold strategy for promises and left your people blind. Don't you ever speak of the country to me. Diallo's composure finally broke. They would have taken you out eventually. I saved us time. I gave us leverage. Traoré rose, slow and grave. You gave them everything. Colonel Bamba reached into his coat again. This time he produced a single paper, a warrant signed and sealed in Ouagadougou. You are under arrest, Ousmane Diallo, Bamba said, in a voice of iron. There was no struggle, only disbelief. As he was shackled, General Diallo looked at Traoré, his voice low. You'll regret this. I already do, Traoré answered. The room remained frozen, even after Diallo was led out. Chairs creaked, eyes flicked around, unsure whether to return to normalcy or remain silent witnesses to something far larger than they'd prepared for. Traoré remained standing, his presence unyielding. This meeting is not disrupted, he said, turning to the rest of the delegates. It is cleansed. The words struck hard. No one dared contradict him. He walked slowly to the center of the table, leaving the folder behind. What happened here is not an act of vengeance. It is justice. His voice carried, low and controlled. Some of you were warned in advance. I told you months ago that betrayal had infected our ranks. And I told you I would not wait for the infection to consume the body. He paused, letting the silence stretch before he turned to Rachel Morgan. You knew this arrest would happen. You were informed 2 weeks ago. You agreed to allow one moment, discreet, contained, so we would not need to make a theater of it. You agreed to give us space for dignity. Morgan's mouth tightened. She gave a slow, reluctant nod. Our terms were clear: no violence, no disruption to international agreements. And they were respected, Traoré replied, because Africa must learn to carry out its reckonings without burning down the room. The Americans didn't like the implications, but no one argued. He walked toward the window now, watching distant clouds over D.C. For years we've exported our unrest. We've turned over our rebels and traitors to foreign courts. We've asked others to police our pain. That era is ending. He turned, this time addressing everyone. We are not afraid of our shadows anymore." Behind the clarity of his speech, the memories came like ghosts. He saw the nights before the mission, the secret meetings in Ouagadougou. Maps spread on tables, satellite photos. Colonel Bamba silent, always listening, his eyes scanning for weakness. The moment they discovered the French connection, the confirmation that someone had leaked troop positions near the northern border, he remembered staring at the map when he said, "Diallo," and the silence that followed said everything. They planned the Washington move with surgical care, a classified corridor through diplomatic channels, a deal with American intelligence, no extradition, but one internal operation allowed, quietly. They had the evidence, they had the legal precedent, and now they had the traitor. Back in the room, Traoré faced the ministers again. "You think this is about one man," he said. "It is not. This is about a lesson. When we allow betrayal to live within our bones, we become sick, and then we start to rot from the inside." He let that image linger. Burkina Faso will not rot. A few seats away, an African minister whispered to his aide, "He speaks like a man possessed." Rachel Morgan, now seated again, folded her arms. "What happens now?" Traoré's voice was firm. "He will return to Burkina Faso. He will face a tribunal, military, fair but unshakable. And if he is found guilty, the law will do what I refuse to enjoy." The calm in his tone left no doubt. There would be no executions behind closed doors, no shadows, just a sharp light. "You may not agree with our ways," he added, "but I promise you this, what happened here today will echo in every capital that ever underestimated us." Then he turned to go. No ceremony, no farewell, just the silent weight of a man who had made history and was already walking past it. As the doors closed behind Traoré, Rachel Morgan stood abruptly, motioning for her aides to follow. In a smaller chamber adjacent to the main hall, screens flickered to life. Intelligence analysts were already reviewing the flash drive handed over by Colonel Bamba. Data scrolled, maps aligned, voices from intercepted calls echoed through secured speakers. "This is airtight," one analyst muttered. Morgan crossed her arms, watching the confirmation unfold. "He came prepared to bury a man and left with our silence." But silence wasn't approval. It was calculation. Back in the hallway, Traoré moved with unhurried steps. His security detail, discreet but present, now flanked him. Colonel Bamba walked behind, stone-faced as ever. "Do you think they understood?" Traoré asked, eyes fixed ahead. "They saw what they needed to see," Bamba replied. "You didn't flinch, that's what matters." The two entered a private lounge arranged for foreign dignitaries. The noise of the outside world faded. The stillness returned. For a moment, neither man spoke. Then Traoré sat and took a long breath. "This wasn't the way I wanted it," he murmured. "Diallo was a brother to me once." "You didn't have a choice," Bamba said. "There's always a choice, but some of them come with no good ending." He leaned back, staring at the ceiling. The lights above were flawless, sterile, like everything in this city. No dust, no echoes, just the illusion of order. He remembered Diallo 10 years ago, in the trenches near Djibo. Mud on their boots, blood in their gloves. They shared a single ration between them. Back then the enemy was visible, guns and uniforms. The betrayal came later, dressed in silence and ambition. Traoré's jaw clenched. "We were supposed to rise together." "You did," Bamba said quietly. "He just didn't keep climbing." The door cracked open. A press liaison entered, hesitant. "President Traoré, the international media is requesting a statement." He nodded once. Minutes later, he stood before the microphones. Lights flashed. Questions flew. But Traoré raised a hand and waited for silence. "In recent days," he began, "we uncovered a betrayal. Today we acted upon it. Burkina Faso remains sovereign. We are not at war. We are not seeking confrontation. But we will not ignore treason, no matter where it hides." Reporters leaned in, sensing something rare, real power unfiltered. "We came to Washington with respect. We leave with clarity. Let it be known, we will handle our house." We will not export our problems, nor allow foreign hands to define our justice. No questions were allowed. He turned and left, each step echoing like the tick of a countdown. The message had been delivered, and the world had heard it. Later that evening, as the jet engines rumbled at Andrews Air Force Base, Traoré stood by the stairs of his aircraft. The wind was cool. The lights on the runway stretched like lines into the horizon. Colonel Bamba approached. "We've secured his transport. He'll be returned under military supervision. Tribunal preparations begin tomorrow." Traoré gave a slow nod. "Thank you." He glanced at the stars. The weight on his shoulders didn't lift, it merely shifted. Justice had its price. And power, if it was to be real, had to pay it in full. As he climbed the steps to the jet, he looked back once. Not at the base, not at the Americans, but at the long shadow he had just cast across continents. It wasn't vengeance, it was history, in motion. The jet lifted from the tarmac, cutting through the night sky like a blade through silk. Inside the cabin, silence reigned. No advisors. No chatter, just Traoré and the hum of engines, high above the world where men plot and fail. He sat by the window, watching the mosaic of lights fade beneath him. America disappeared behind the clouds. Ahead lay home, scarred but standing, waiting for his return. His reflection stared back at him from the glass. He barely recognized it. What kind of man walks into a room of generals and walks out with one in chains? A man who carries 1,000 ghosts. A man who gave up comfort the day he chose truth over survival. His thoughts drifted to the last words exchanged with Diallo. In a secured room at the base, before the general was escorted to the transport unit, Traoré had offered no insults, only one final glance. Diallo had tried to speak. "You're making me the villain." Traoré's voice had been cold. "No, you made yourself invisible. That's worse." Then he turned and walked away. Back in the present, the aircraft moved steadily east. Below, borders passed unnoticed. But the storm Traoré had set in motion was already spreading across them. In Burkina Faso, the news had broken within hours. General Ousmane Diallo arrested for treason. Screens glowed in night markets. Radios whispered in farmlands. Soldiers stood straighter at their posts. Some cheered, some whispered in fear. But all understood, the president was not to be tested. In the capital, ministers gathered in emergency session, not in panic, but in awe. None had expected him to move so decisively, and none would forget how cleanly it was done. Aide after aide asked the same question. What comes next? The answer was already taking form. Traoré would convene a national tribunal, public, recorded, irreversible. The trial would not be a spectacle, but a reckoning. The military, the people, even the foreign eyes, they would all witness the consequences of betrayal in a nation that refused to be puppeteered. As the plane descended toward Ouagadougou, the lights of the city glittered like stars scattered across soil. Home, the cradle of his purpose. He stepped off the aircraft alone. The reception was silent. No red carpets, no cameras. Only Colonel Bamba and 2 soldiers standing at attention. "The court will be ready by morning," Bamba said. Traoré nodded. "Let them come," he replied. "Let the world see." That night, from his private residence, he wrote a single sentence in his notebook, the same leather-bound one he had carried since his first battle. "You can kill a man, but you cannot kill the message he carries in his spine." He closed the book and rested it on the table. Outside, the wind stirred the dust. Somewhere in the distance, a mother told her child the story of a man who walked into a foreign court and walked out with dignity in both hands. The child asked, "Is it true?" And the mother answered, "Yes. And we will not forget." Thank you for following this powerful story. If you want more stories like this, bold, political, and unfiltered, make sure to subscribe to the channel. And don't miss the next chapter of Africa's transformation. Click the video on your screen now and continue the journey.